for me, fRoD, the gap between them and every other team in the region, probably every other team in the world, let's be honest, is huge.
I think that he's a big piece that is allowing everyone to kind of function.
Really, they changed the way that this entire tournament worked.
Welcome to another episode of the Certo's Curveball review show presented by DJ Esports. They're the world's premier all crypto esports betting site providing real-time odds on professional games. And while there has been a lot of professional Valorant games coming out of the VCT across both EMEA and NA that we'll be covering here today. And as always, I've got Mitch and fRoD joining me to break it all down. So fRoD, how you doing, man?
Doing great, man. I mean, I think that this has been just one of the most intense qualifiers that we've seen on both regions. I think there was so many great results that I really can't wait to just dive into that.
And Mitch, it was not so much glory for EU, but at least the EMEA?
EMEA? Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to call it all EU from now on. I claim the CIS, I claim Turkey. You know, they can come into the EU family and we'll all just sit around the dinner table and eat up that NA competition.
You're really riding on this, Mitch. One day it might come to actually work out in your favor, but for now, NA are certainly the ones that are on top. I want to take a look at the brackets.
I'm being generous.
Though. I know you're being nice. You're being generous.
I called them competition.
I give up with him, fRoD. We've got to ignore this man.
We move on.
Yeah, just move straight on. We're going on to our playoff brackets, and I'm going to start with EMEA. And just looking down EMEA, right, when we're having a look at what actually happened in terms of the games, the first big one that comes to mind, Mitch, is obviously Na'Vi being able to take down Team Liquid for sure. But then what we saw was Na'Vi not being able to really stand up. They then go straight out and be eliminated, right? They had a good win against Liquid, but then it wasn't really a good showing for them, and they were one of the first teams going out.
Yeah, it was a one-off little upset that came through. You know, we were excited to see what Na'Vi could do, and some people were even predicting Liquid to have a slightly slower start to the tournament. Shout out Tom for that. He might be one of the only people that was on that Na'Vi hype train, at least for the first match. But yeah, they came up against the Sen in that second round, and you really can't give them... you got to cut them a lot of slack for that, because it is a tough matchup up against the Sen, and especially for a newly formed team like Na'Vi, you're still working on a lot of your protocols. And whenever you're playing up against the Sen, they are going to exploit those little weaknesses that you're going to have. From there, what they go down, they lose to Giants. Very, very close game. Easily could have went Na'Vi's way. Couple of rounds separating them at times. So I think overall, as a debut for this Na'Vi team, it was a very good debut. It shows a lot of promise for the future in what these individuals and this team overall can do.
All right, so I think that Na'Vi is a really good team. I mean, that win against Liquid was not just a fluke win. It was obviously them prepared for that game. They took it to them. Unfortunately, it ran into a very good team in Ascend. But, you know, this is what happens where you can play that storyline of kind of, ruining someone's opportunity. And this is exactly what happened with Liquid, because being able to take down Liquid gave them such a tough route that they ended up having to play a team like Gambit to progress in the tournament. So it was going to be one of those two teams that was not going to make it. And Gambit, which I think was one of the better teams this whole entire tournament, ended up winning the whole thing. I mean, Liquid was not going to stand in their way.
Yeah, certainly not. And then we obviously have to talk a little bit about G2, because when we looked at the last preview show, Mitch, we were saying that, this G2 with the roster changes could be pretty scary. We know they definitely would be able to put up some numbers, but for them to be able to make it to Berlin straight away, that is super impressive.
Yeah, it absolutely was. You know, obviously they did well the first run in Challengers, making it into this. They skipped the first round. They had Oxygen to start with, and I was willing to make a lot of excuses for them at that point that, they had some pretty easy matches. Oxygen, it's whatever. Supermassive Blaze game rolls around and Supermassive completely destroyed them. And I started to think that, okay, this team it's not cutting it, right? Like, you look at what actually, I think right after that game, we had the conversation on the stream that we were saying, you know, G2 have invested a lot of cash, a lot of money into building this team. This is supposed to be the EU super team, and that matchup of Supermassive Blaze versus G2 was sort of the Turkish and EU super teams colliding, and Turkey came out on top pretty convincingly in that one. So when G2 went down to the lower bracket, they were very seriously facing elimination up against Giants, and they just about managed to edge it out. Now, at that point, I'm still not filled with a lot of faith that this is going to be a team that can compete at the top level of worldwide competition. But the game versus Gambit restored a little bit of faith in me. It was a tight one. Gambit still won, but considering they then went on to beat Ascend and indeed Supermassive Blaze in the grand final, you can definitely say that G2 had a deep run, a good run, and we saw a lot, especially from Keloqz. And this guy, he's experiencing a lot of pressure and at least on the scale that it's on, a lot of it's going to be for the first time that he's experiencing this. And the way he handled it here, certainly towards the end of the tournament, fills me with a bit of hope that when it comes to experiencing this all over again at his first big LAN, that he'll be able to buckle down on that.
Yeah, what I like about G2 is they did overcome, giants and were able to win that game. But in my opinion, I think that, if you look at all the teams that did qualify through to Berlin from the EMEA region, they had the easiest route there. If you really think about it, they beat Oxygen Giants and they basically got through. So to me, I kind of want to see where they can go. I'm very confident in them because they've at least kind of hit the reset button, got the right pieces to take this team to new heights, and they've been progressing consistently. That game against Supermassive Blaze was kind of a red flag in some sort of way, but as you continue to watch Supermassive Blaze play, you kind of get to see like, okay, maybe it wasn't that G2 was playing bad or whatever, and it wasn't like a bad day. I think Supermassive Blaze is just that good. So you kind of like, obviously the score line tells a completely different story, but at the end of the day, you have to give credit to those guys and you can't take the victory away from them. So if you kind of say, oh, G2's playing bad or G2's terrible, you're taking credit away from guys that absolutely deserve all the credit in the world for that victory.
Well, we will continue talking about the EMEA region, what was going on throughout the rest of the show, but I want to now come on to our North American side of the bracket. And okay, it was nice and I would say pretty easy for Sentinels. We kind of expect this going in there, but I would say when we look at this, right, I would say my biggest disappointment, and I don't know if you agree with me, fRoD, is TSM out here, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there was a general disappointment around any team that kind of made it out there because they all had their certain expectations. I don't think that anyone really expected TSM to win the whole thing. Obviously, they would have liked to have performed better, but their route kind of dictated it differently. I mean, they were playing Envy first round. That was one of the hottest teams going outside of Sentinels, right? So right out the gate, that's going to be something tough to overcome when you're, a team that's pretty much just formulated some different pieces and are going and building momentum. So Envy could just cut your momentum right there. And then when they got sent to the lower bracket and had to play Rise, I mean, that was one of the teams that I kind of viewed as one of the underdogs that was going to show out and perform very, very highly. And they beat TSM. So obviously in some way I wouldn't say that it was like that big of an upset, but at the same time TSM, I'm sure their expectation going into that and going into a tournament was to win and to go much further. So in reality, that's probably one of the teams that you would have, that you can go in there and say, yeah, they definitely expected to do a lot better. But yeah, they definitely had a tough route, and that game losing to Rise was not helpful for them.
Yeah, I gotta say as well, like having a player like Ye who's coming in now and certainly in terms of that early round aggression surpassing everybody within the region, it's really helping Envy a lot in competing with some of these lesser refined teams, because you allow Ye just off the leash a little bit to take some of these frags, especially when he's playing the Jet. But even if he's on a Sage, you see that aggression come out and you see it successfully. And I think that's something we've seen in EMEA a lot as well, that especially on a Sage, like playing a hyper aggressive duelist. And obviously we remember back in the day, James, you David P, Battle Sage. I was like, I mean, right at the start of Valorant, we were talking about that with the old G2. But now it's become a much more refined thing. It's not played in anywhere near the same way that it once was, but we'll see, especially with those walls, man. I don't know what it was in the EMEA playoffs. People were walling above everything just to grab those little nasty angles, more than we'd ever seen before. So I'm keeping a close damn eye on Ye, and honestly, moving into EMEA competition, I think he's going to be maybe stepping away from that Jet a little bit, maybe tending a little bit more towards those other agents like his Sage, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about like the whole Battle Sage stuff, and when you even look at someone like Sentinels with Sick, that when sometimes when he would play it, I mean, you're looking at it typically from the secondary duelist that goes into that sort of role, and they have their moments of restraint. But when you have Ye or you have your primary duelist, because you even see sometimes CNET going on Sage, they can potentially take the Battle Sage to a completely different level. So that's where it's like, what you're saying is exactly right as far as seeing where these guys can take these agents. And I'm actually very curious to see where it goes, because when you go into a major and you go into competition, you might tend to look into strategy more than like a head-to-head skill. So in some terms, some teams might want to bring out the best agent composition out there, and it's like you can't deny Sage, because Sage is just one of the best agents out there. So if teams are going to try and fit her into the style, then I think if you do that with the primary side, it's going to be a whole different game plan.
And also, speaking from a more supportive element as well, I think Crashies has some of the best utility within North America as well. Like when it comes down to placing those little trap wires down, getting your little SOVA recons on the right spot, this guy just can't seem to go wrong. And I really respect Crashies as a competitor, the entirety of the MV team, of course. But I think that coming into Europe, they're definitely going to face a huge challenge with these CIS, with these Turkish teams, and really battling all the different styles that the world brings to the table.
Well, let's keep it with our NA conversation here, guys, and start talking about, well, I think you both harped on me that this wasn't really like an underdog prediction, but I went with like thinking and wanting to see 100 Thieves do very well. Obviously, they end up finishing in the second place out there, but that lower bracket game versus Envy, that was something pretty damn special, fRoD.
Yeah, I mean, when you can see these guys play in a best of 5 series, it's going to be a gauntlet. You know, I think, unfortunately, in some way, these seeding matches take a little bit out of it, but I know that the players want to win, and I know that they view it as being able to progress into a better seed at Berlin. So, you know, it does mean a lot, and I think that this was a great way for everyone to kind of see what's out there. But what I do expect is these teams are going to change it up quite a bit going into Berlin, because the one thing that I will say is that there is so much like VODs out there and so many games out there. So, you know, obviously Yae and Envy can kind of capitalize on that new player, new sort of meta that they bring to the table, and new spice that he adds. Well, now there's going to be a ton of VODs that people are going to be able to study and watch. And as we've seen other teams, you know, obviously some of the, like I think Liquid, they're not going to be at Berlin, but I think Slig had mentioned how many pages upon pages of notes they had on some teams. So expect for Yae to start getting read on a lot. But this is where I think that you're going to see some of the people on the NV side, the experience that they have as a unit, guys like FNS, their coach Mikes, they're going to bring something different to try and like kind of big brain their way through this tournament, and then have the skill that they have, like their high skill, be that sort of safety net that kind of keeps them or wins them if things aren't going their way, like maybe in the strategy side of things.
You know, one of the interesting points as well, just quickly, while we're talking about an MV matchup, on Crashies, I went and checked, and he's got the 5th highest assist per round out of anyone in North America. And I've heard a lot of conversations when it comes to Reddit. I mean, people love to just sit there and go bottom scoreboard, bad player. Like it's so typical, especially when that team loses. Like, you go to Reddit, 100 Thieves MV 3-2, super tight game. It's like all 5 maps played out. Sure, some of them are a little bit one-sided, but if all 5 maps played out, and there's always going to be that one guy who's like, if Hiko just got some more kills, they would have won that quicker. And it's like, dude, shut up, god damn it. And sure, Crashies might not put up the numbers when it comes to damage, when it comes to being able to, you know, take up those duels with some of these other players like your Asunas, like your Ethans. But the reality is, he's bringing a lot to the table, as is everyone on the Envy side. And the biggest challenge for them is going to be innovation. It's going to be adaptation when it comes to playing against these other teams in the world that they haven't had a chance to yet.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, Crashies is, in my opinion, the best SOVA in our region, if not the world. And the way that he plays the game, it's not only, like you said, it's like if you're seeing him go crazy, and as far as like posting up huge numbers lately, which is massive to see, but in the games that he doesn't, the impact is not in the scoreboard, because you see it in the comms, you see it in the way that he sets up other players, those recon darts that he may or may not get assist based off of. He's making calls, he's retaining a lot of information. He's just a very good player, and I think that he kind of adds that different, or not that he adds, because he's always been on that squad, but I think that he's a big piece that is allowing everyone to kind of function and kind of just operate smoothly within the way that they all flow.
Yeah, that is a great point, but I'm 100% certain that Big Members 63 over on Reddit's going to counter that with the simple argument that bottom of scoreboard, bad player. So, unlucky.
Yeah, we'll look for them comments after the shows. You know, these guys, the real experts out there, not us at all. On to the next point, though, we've got to look at Sentinels, because I know Sentinels are dominant, but like for me, fRoD, the gap between them and every other team in the region, probably every other team in the world, let's be honest, is huge. Like, everyone that goes up against them, you might be able to take a map. They lost 2 maps total, so like 1 in the grand final, 1 at the beginning to Rise. But it's like, okay, you look at them and you think that they're so dominant that I still think 100 Thieves and an Envy or whoever else you want to put there, it's like here, when the other teams are a bit more like you can close, you can fight it out, but like Sentinels are just way above. Are they that unstoppable? Like, how much time would it take for a team in NA to be able to catch up to them?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I don't think they're unbeatable, because other teams have shown that they can at least take a map and maybe beat them and stuff like that. But what I think that separates Sentinels apart from every other team is their mentality and their pride in being those gatekeepers, because there's a lot of times that being able to reach that #1 status is an accomplishment in itself. When you could get to the point that you can understand that maintaining the #1 status is a separate accomplishment, and you could separate the two and go for that goal instead of the other goal, then you start realizing that that becomes something that you want to achieve on a day-to-day basis. And I think that that's something that you see that Sentinels is kind of embodying, as far as like when they play these qualifiers, when they play these tournaments, the amount of times that these guys stream and play the game, you know, like they're so dedicated and so into this game as a unit, all of them, that I think that that alone is going to be something that, you know, unless someone or them as a team starts letting off the gas a little bit, I don't see them kind of letting off at all. And like I said, if another team is going to be able to beat them and win tournaments and do that consistently, I'm not even sure that that's going to be Sentinels dropping off. I think the other team is just going to go and take it to new heights, and maybe that could be a team from EU that does that, or CIS more, in fact, not even, you know, like maybe Turkey. But it's like, I don't think it's going to be Sentinels kind of going downhill. I think another team is just going to try and take it to a different level that maybe, you know, someone hasn't seen.
That's a really important thing, a really, really important point, because we've seen it so many times. You know, obviously when G2 fell off, you know, after that giant run that they had, they fell off. Everyone caught up and kept moving with the game, reinventing the meta, pushing forward. And G2 were still at that point that they had initially leaped to. They leapt in front of everybody, but then they just kind of sat there and went, I'm in the lead. And eventually people went past them. But the worst argument that I hear, the worst narrative, and it's the easiest one to sell, is just, oh, they're not winning anymore, so they got worse, or they stopped caring, or they lost focus, or they blah, blah, blah. No, this is not how this shit works. There's no professional players that are sitting down going, well, we're qualified for champions now, so it doesn't matter if we don't qualify for masters or if we don't win, and we're happy with top 8 in masters. We're happy to lose to a Brazilian team or an SEA because we're in champions. No, that's not how this works. Nobody has that mentality. So it really rubs me the wrong way when I hear that being so consistently thrown out there, that, oh, who knows if they still care. They do. They don't get that good by not caring.
Yep. Trigger points for sure.
Absolutely.
The community, the comments, you know, we see players get frustrated by it on Twitter, but we also see it and we're like, yeah, come on, why? But, you know, some fans, they don't really understand the game. They're just watching to enjoy the shooting, and they don't understand the dynamics that go behind it. But that's not our viewers of the show. Our viewers on the show are smart until they disagree with our power rankings, which you're not allowed to do.
And then they get some of this. some of this.
No,
I've been in the boxing, James. A few weeks in. Oof.
I need to put a leash on you or something, like I can then I press a button to just stop you before you start. No, not like that.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Oh god, this has really gone too far away from what I wanted. I want to start talking about EMEA, Mitch, you know, so you should be happy. We've got on to bits you love most. But before that, reminder for all of you guys watching, Curveball is presented by DJ Esports, and you guys can earn up to 800,000 USDT in the free-to-enter DJ Esports World's Prediction Series. Sign up on the link in the description below and you can get 400 DJT for free, but it is only for a limited time, so make sure you go and get it fast. We are going to get onto your EMEA though, Mitch, so you can be as biased as you want here, but I'm going to start off with a negative, mate, because there's no Fnatic. And I know, look, we are both friends with Boaster. We love Boaster, the hard work and the commitment he puts in. He knew this wasn't good enough, right? This is a huge failure for these guys, and it definitely stings, but it's like, what do you do now? What? Because you've got all this time now to prepare, right, and get yourselves into a better state. I'm sure they can, but the thing I don't want to see them do is some crazy like knee-jerk reaction, like a change comes in or something, because I still love what I see from them as a team. This was just proving that it's getting far more competitive out here.
Yeah, most definitely. Fnatic not making it is a big blow to them, to the European scene as well, because whilst we'll talk about the Turkish teams, the CIS teams, and the promise that they bring, really our representation is Ascend and G2 now. We don't have our Fnatics, we don't have our Liquids, we don't have these teams that we were expecting to really fly our flag for us once more. And I want to take that from a perspective of, we have more depth within this region, we have a double elimination system with good seeding that worked out quite well for giving teams who previously weren't on top of the scene a good opportunity to fight for that slot, and, well, successfully making it there. And I think that, you know, not having Fnatic sucks, but they will definitely go back to the drawing board. They will definitely improve. I think the scarier thing, because Fnatic are in last chance qualifier pretty much 100%, as you will have the same with Liquid. So these guys are not out of the running for champions. But FPX, on the other hand, they're gone. They're done for the year. They lost what? So let's look at their run through the bracket. They destroyed Fireflux, who, I mean, that might as well have been a bye in every game they played. Then Supermassive Blaze knocked them down, an acceptable loss for sure.
Yeah.
Forza ended FPX's chances of even making it to the last chance qualifier. Champions is gone. You know, there came a point then where it all depended on how other teams finished, and obviously having your destiny in the hands of another is never going to be ideal. And I know there was talk about if an EU team wins Masters plus Guild didn't win a certain game and this, that, the other, but from what I understand, that's all gone now. It's all done. There is no possibility for them making it there. And, well, Banks, back in our day, you know, FPX were a guaranteed number 2 in every single tournament. They finally got to that first spot, and they did not hold on to it all too long, slipping down to what is now, I mean, top 10, just outside top 10. It's irrelevant. Exactly. Well, for the rest of the year, yeah, 6 months of no VCT for them.
I mean, the reason why I say that too is because you have to understand the expectation, and kind of touching on what you said about Liquid and Fnatic, as well as FPX, obviously, is they have the expectation to win. And the reason why I even lump FPX in there is not because of maybe some of the wins they've had, is because the way that Angel kind of talks, especially how he talks about like the NA region and other things too. Like, if you're going to talk that big, you better at least be the best in your region. If you're not even like top 10 in your region in some sort of ways, especially when you're now including CIS, Turkey, and everyone else, I mean, like I said, you're going to fall into some sort of irrelevancy unless you're going to start making changes. And I mean, when that kind of happens, you're going to have to start looking at drastic things. And that could be, you know, the strategy, the approach of the game. And the one thing that I will say is that, you know, some of the teams, like, for example, Liquid and Fnatic, they played very well, but they didn't really adapt or change as much from anything that much previous. And I think that was kind of stopping their innovation, because not only are they one of the most watched teams out there, but these are the teams that have been staples in that region. So, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone, like, when these guys have a target on their back and all these young teams are gunning against them and they're not adapting and changing and just kind of staying within their ways, I mean, they're basically feeding the information over and just kind of they're preparing the other team for when they face up against them. And that's not something that, when you're trying to achieve and be the best team in your region, you got to kind of sprinkle in that innovation right now. And that's kind of what I've not been seeing from some of these teams that, you know, I feel like are, you know, kind of sliding down those EMEA rankings.
I'd love to get you guys' opinion on this when it comes to FPX as well, because I feel like sometimes at the moment, like, we used to praise Angel so heavily, Mitch, on the fact that he was able to lead by example. You know, he was the first one in, he was opening up rounds and stuff. But I also started to look at, like, their way of trying to play the game, and maybe they're trying to, like, break meta or, like, find a new meta before it's needed. You know, sometimes I feel like they're trying too hard to push the limits, that maybe sometimes you just need to go back into something that's more standard.
I agree with you in the sense that I think what they do isn't necessarily a problem as much as when they do it. I mean, they tried to outbrain Forza. You don't need to outbrain Forza.
You just roll over them, right?
Yep. You put you put Xiao on a jet, you put Zip on whatever the hell he wants to play. You just go wreck them. And that's how they should be able to deal with them. Now, you try to outbrain them, sure. You're not disallowed from that, but there comes a point where you start to realize, you know, map 1 goes by, things are a little bit tighter. You're like, man, if Xiao was just on a jet right now, if he was playing the way we've seen from him in some of the more recent games where they debuted that, then maybe he can absolutely destroy, as they've been doing in Challengers. But I think they overthought it a little bit, but even still, there is the element that they probably still should have won, overthinking it or not. Like, this was a big hiccup at the worst possible time. It's reminiscent of the Vision Strikers when they didn't make it to Masters.
And I think that this could be one of these things that sometimes these IGLs, they get into this problem where instead of playing to your strengths, you play towards the other team's weakness. And what happens is that you remove your own identity while you're doing that in the process. So what happens is that, you know, why are we practicing? Why are we playing every day if all we're going to do is switch it up every day? And guess what happens? If we win that game, we play again in a couple hours. Is that enough time to revamp that against that specific team? No. So what happens is that you're constantly not looking, you know, through the eyeball or the glass of ball the right way, because you're never looking within, you're looking outwards all the time. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems with these teams that are having, because it's sort of like an identity crisis that when they want to get through that hurdle or like past that hump or whatever, it's like, you don't have an identity to really take that. And that's the one thing that when you start seeing some of these teams that are dominating where their region respectively, whether it's Supermassive Blaze or Sentinels or Gambit, they have an identity, and that's like very clear cut. And whether it works or whether it doesn't, you at least can understand that, and they feed to it every day, and they don't remove that and go against other teams' weaknesses. So that's where I think the other teams need to change. But hey, you know, they got big brain IGLs, big brain coaching staffs, and I'm over here doing this, right? So it's like they obviously think they might know better, but the results need to obviously change because it's not proven, and their teams and the organizations expect victories, and these results are just frankly not good enough.
I think there's definitely an element as well where you look at it and say they're trying to rehearse things, they're trying to test things in that match versus fRoD that they would use then later on and see if it's viable.
Not in a lower bracket match. Not in a lower bracket match.
That's the thing, right? Lower bracket match. This is where things just kind of derail completely. Like when we saw them not go the just full confidence that we're better than you, let's go, bring it. We were very worried, and well, rightly so.
Yeah. And if you could lump it into that overthinking bracket, anything that you do in your approach, whether you're a player, whether you're an IGO or a coach, then automatically you're kind of, you know, approaching it in the wrong way.
We've got a new segment for you guys, as it's time for us to delve into which teams did the impossible with Against the Odds, presented by DJ Esports. fRoD, when it comes to this, we obviously know we've made a decision on who our Against the Odds team is, but there are some teams that also need some honorable mention in this for what they have been able to achieve. So I'm going to let you start with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was Rise. I mean, they were one of the teams that were viewed as potentially an underdog, but they actually took a map off Sentinels. They beat TSM, and they were very competitive in the whole entire tournament. You know, they could have potentially gone further, but I think that was a very, very strong showing from them. And, you know, one of these young teams that are just going to potentially, you know, be the next ones up. Yeah,
and this is the thing, right? Not only is it the fact they got a map off them, but I guess it's the way they do these kind of like games, because we were talking about this earlier. When you look at like Sentinels being the dominant team, and they can obviously scare other teams and players away in many ways, the fact that they're able to compete where many teams just roll over and die against Sentinels fills me with a lot of confidence for what they might be able to do in the future.
And the one thing when you see Rise, and like I was mentioning earlier, is like you see like a lot of NA teams, like they play to their strengths. You know, when they have guys like Shanks, now they got Superman, like they have sort of flexibility in just knowing Super and certain elements that he's doing. Like he's dropping frenzies for his duelists and stuff like that. Like they're taking certain, like he's taking the support game to a different level. So it's like they're doing all these little things that I feel like they're on the right track. Obviously they didn't, you know, get far enough, but they're one of those teams that one more win easily would have been up there, maybe even in our top 10.
Yeah, could have pushed their way in, right? That's certainly possible. We'll have to keep an eye on it for next time. You never know how many things may go, especially when the other smaller cups and events will be going on as well. Now, Mitch, though, you've got an honorable mention for us. You've got one you want to pick out here, mate?
That I do. Over in EMEA, I mean, we've already talked about them a little bit, but I'll just say, you know, the fact that Natus Vincere came in here, debuting off their performance as a roster, they had a fantastic game against Liquid to open things up. And the reason that I find that such a big deal, not only because Liquid were supposed to win that match, they were favorites for sure. They've been around a lot longer. They have Yampy IGLing, and he's looking fantastic in that role now. The thing is, Navi winning that match meant that Liquid ended up on the same side of the bracket as Gambit. Instead of potentially facing off against G2 for a qualifying spot, they faced off against Gambit. Now, that is a huge difference. That's assuming Liquid would have lost to Ascend, and even then, I'll give you pretty tight odds on that game. So, really, they changed the way that this entire tournament worked just by finding that one little upset right at the start, a real butterfly effect.
And I love the fact that for Na'Vi, right, that they've just entered into Valorant. It's a new team put together, some players that certainly know each other for sure, but they came through, they had this bit of success against Liquid, and give them some more time, right? That's what they deserve, and we'll see them flourish further, I'm sure. But it is time to get on to our team we are picking who went against the odds. And this is presented by DJ Esports. And well, this team's coming out of the EMEA region as well. It's Supermassive Blaze. This is a team from Turkey who truly did go against the odds, because you end up with kind of having a mix of players all from one region. You have the Warrior players potentially being picked away from your lineup, you know, and you think that, oh, they're not going to have like success when they come against these bigger teams with bigger name brands and stuff like that. Well, they delivered monstrous performances. Obviously, Poro comes out from Team Heretics. He's had his successes there already, but I'm just glad we didn't see it like kind of become a bit of a meme where you see a Turkish super team, as they call them, right? And they don't hit as hard, or they're lacking. Because when if you look at compared to other esports and you look at Turkish teams, you probably say that like, oh, they've got some individual great players, but you've never seen one whole team from Turkey be successful and dominant. This gives me hope for sure.
Yeah, I mean, maybe outside
100%.
of like Space Soldiers, like even in the Counter-Strike days, but it's even then, it's like these guys are taking it to a different level, because the way that these guys were able to take some of these victories was extremely impressive. Like the way that they beat G2 wasn't even competitive in that game. So to me, that was one of those things that it's kind of like we mentioned earlier. It's not even to knock G2. It's anything. It just goes to show how strong and talented these guys are. And it's not just one player. It's that whole entire lineup.
Yeah, the real blows that they dealt. I mean, they knocked FPX down to the lower bracket, who then immediately went out, basically, you know, ending their run of potentially making it to champions, ending their year right away with a couple months left of potential play. Supermassive Blaze defeat G2 and then Ascend. Obviously, we see them lose to Gambit, but the important thing is that in literally all of the games that they played, they were against the odds. They were not favorites. FPX should on paper have beaten them after G2's opening performance against Oxygen, and considering the caliber of players they have, they should have beaten them. And then up against Ascend, the same thing was true, and although it came very close, they once again went against the odds and managed to take that win. So I have to give massive props to them. And obviously, we know that this team has got so much. You've got Russ, who obviously was coming from BBL, the person who replaced CNED. So when I tell you that CNED left a roster and their first thought was to get this player in, you know that he's pretty damn good if he's filling those boots. Even 10%, he's better than most of the world. You've got Turco, one of the best clutchers out there, who came from Oxygen, another top-level competitor within the Turkish scene. Obviously, Pora, who's had his success on an international level when it came to the Heretics roster and First Strike. I mean, this entire roster is built of incredible players. And obviously, I have to mention Izzy, the fact that this guy has come out of practically nowhere. I mean, the team he played on before was Kafalar Esports, and I'm going to be very honest with you, I've never heard of them or seen them play. And this guy, I heard a lot about him, heard he was a good player. He's been absolutely unbelievable, pound for pound with CNED at times, for sure. So this overall roster, when you look at them, you know they're a super team, but they just were not expected to put up the kind of numbers that they did. And, well, I think that might continue moving on to international competition.
Yeah, and I think that they're probably one of the most complete teams in the EMEA region, maybe probably aside of Gambit, when it comes to just like a complete and total roster, not maybe necessarily like with like a superstar here and there kind of carrying some loads in certain ways. It's like these are just complete teams right here that it's just like you just can't wait to see what happens in Berlin. And I'm so grateful to actually get the opportunity to watch them, because we didn't get to see them last time, at least with you know, Ascend and everything. Supermassive Blaze is a new team, so this is something that they've come, you know, out of nowhere and are taking the world by storm, and we just can't wait to kind of see them at Berlin now.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting times, and it shows that there's a lot more depth in this Turkish kind of rosters that you can find, the players you can find, because like you mentioned, Mitch, finding a player that comes kind of from a team we've never heard of, obscurity, can actually deliver, does make me think that we might get a few more of these Turkish players potentially landing themselves on some European teams as well. What do you reckon?
I reckon that's it's pretty bang on, man. You know why it's even more impressive? You have players like CNED, who's dominating on the international scene, at least on the EMEA scene for now. And he's playing from Turkey a lot of the time. This dude is playing on mad ping. When he started playing in Europe, he was like 90 to 100, 70 to 100 at least. That's a good day if he's hitting 70. And he's able to still play that operator role, still go for those early peaks, and consistently put up numbers far beyond anyone else on the server. So if they've got that kind of talent that they can actually compete online against these other EMEA teams, first of all, imagine what they're going to be like on LAN. And secondly, we need to start eating some Turkish food. I don't know what they have for breakfast. I don't know if it's some kind of goats or camel's milk or what's going on, but we need to get it, and we need to get it now.
I think you might need to go to Turkey, Mitch, before the next episode to understand what they eat.
Hey, I'm down. If Deserto want to send me out there, you know, we can do a curveball live from
Live
Turkey.
show. Let's go.
I'm down. Yeah. Just it's like Carl Pilkington, an idiot abroad.
That's a good show.
Oh, I'm ready for it. We need to do a live show. That's the next step up for us. But that does bring us actually to the end of this show, guys. Thank you very much for your insight and thoughts. It's been a crazy few weeks of Valorant action in here. We know which teams are going to Berlin, and that's where we'll be delivering the next preview show for you guys. So make sure you stay tuned for that one. Thank you very much for watching, and a big thanks for DJ Esports for being here with us. We'll see you on the next episode.